Sunday morning brought with it a sense of urgency that Jake tried desperately to ignore. Emma would be leaving tomorrow, returning to her life in Chicago and her visit with her aunt. The thought left him feeling hollow in a way that surprised and frightened him. Emma seemed to sense his mood when she came down for breakfast. She was quieter than usual, stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. "Everything all right?" she asked as they finished their coffee. "Fine," Jake replied automatically, then caught himself. Emma deserved better than his standard deflections. "I was thinking about showing you the upper pasture today. There's something up there you might like to see." Her face brightened immediately. "I'd love that." They saddled Thunder and one of the gentler maras, a pretty bay named Honey. Emma had insisted she remembered enough about riding from her childhood to manage, and Jake was pleased to see she had a natural seat and gentle hands with the horse. The upper pasture was a good hour's ride from the main ranch, up a winding trail that led through stands of pine and aspen. Emma marveled at the scenery, asking questions about the wildlife and the history of the land. Jake found himself telling her stories he hadn't shared with anyone in years, memories of his grandfather and the summers they had spent exploring every inch of the ranch. When they reached the crest of the hill, Emma gasped and pulled Honey to a stop. Spread out below them was a hidden valley, green and lush with a small lake in the center that reflected the sky like a perfect mirror. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "How did you find this place?" "My grandfather brought me here when I was 10, Jake said, dismounting and helping Emma down from her horse. "Said every man needed a place where he could think without the world bothering him." They sat by the lake's edge, eating the lunch Jake had packed and watching a family of deer drink at the water's edge. Emma felt a peace here that she had never experienced before, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with Chicago or her old life. "Jake," she said suddenly, "can I ask you something personal?" His shoulders tensed, but he nodded. "The woman in the photo downstairs. What happened?" For a moment, Emma thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, Jake picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water, watching the ripples spread outward. "Her name was Rebecca," he said finally. "We were supposed to get married 3 years ago. Big church wedding, the whole town invited. She left me standing at the altar with a note saying she couldn't live the kind of life I was offering her." Emma felt her heart clench with sympathy. "I'm so sorry." Jake shrugged, but Emma could see the pain in his eyes. She was probably right. This isn't the kind of life most women want. Isolated, quiet, predictable. Some women might find that perfect. "Yeah? Like who?" Emma met his gaze steadily. "Like someone who's tired of the noise and chaos. Someone who values loyalty and honesty over excitement." Something flickered in Jake's eyes, hope mixed with fear. "Emma. I know we barely know each other," she said quickly. "But these past few days have been the most peaceful I've felt in years. There's something about this place, about you, that makes me feel like I can breathe again." Jake stood abruptly, walking to the water's edge with his back to her. "You don't know what you're saying. You have a life in Chicago, a job, friends. I have a job I'm burned out on, an apartment I can barely afford, and friends who only call when they need something," Emma replied honestly. "I came on this trip because I needed to figure out what I really wanted from life." "And what do you want?" Emma joined him at the water's edge, close enough to see the conflict in his expression. "I want to feel useful. I want to matter to someone. I want to wake up every morning in a place that feels like home." Jake turned to face her, his gray eyes intense. "Emma, don't romanticize this. Ranch life is hard work, long hours, and isolation. There's no theater, no fancy restaurants, no career opportunities. Just cattle and horses and endless chores. Is that really what you think matters to me?" Emma asked softly. "Jake, I grew up on stories about my grandmother's farm. I became a teacher because I wanted to make a difference, not because I wanted to get rich. And the past 3 days have shown me what I've been missing." Jake reached out as if to touch her face, then dropped his hand. "You'd get bored. You'd miss the city. Maybe." Or maybe I'd find out that this is where I belong. They stared at each other for a long moment, the air between them charged with possibility and fear. Then, Jake stepped back, shaking his head. We should head back. Storm clouds are building. The ride down the mountain was silent, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Emma could feel Jake withdrawing from her, building his walls back up just when she thought she had gotten through to him. That evening, the tension between them was palpable. They moved around each other carefully, making polite conversation about the weather and Emma's travel plans. After dinner, Jake disappeared into his study to work on ranch accounts, leaving Emma alone in the living room. She found herself standing in front of the mantelpiece again, looking at the damaged wedding photo. On impulse, she carefully lifted it from its place and examined it more closely. Rebecca had been beautiful, that much was clear from what remained of the photo. But what struck Emma was how Jake looked in the picture. Younger, yes, but also more open, more hopeful. The man in the photo was someone who believed in love and happy endings. You shouldn't be looking at that. Emma turned to find Jake standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Why do you keep it if it causes you pain? She asked gently. To remind myself not to make the same mistake twice. What mistake? Falling in love? Jake crossed the room and took the photo from her hands, placing it back on the mantel. Believing that someone could actually want this life. Want me? Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Jake, not everyone is Rebecca. How do I know that? How do I know you won't wake up in 6 months and realize you've made a terrible mistake? How does anyone know anything? Emma countered. Life doesn't come with guarantees. But that doesn't mean we should stop taking chances. Jake was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the edge of the mantelpiece. Finally, he said, I can't go through that again, Emma. I won't survive it a second time. Emma moved closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. Then, don't think about it as a chance you're taking. Think about it as a gift you're giving yourself. What kind of gift? The gift of letting someone love you exactly as you are. Jake's head snapped up, his eyes searching her face. Emma. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, she said softly. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe we found each other for a reason. Before Jake could respond, a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the room, followed immediately by a crash of thunder that shook the windows. The storm that had been building all afternoon had arrived with a vengeance. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging them into darkness broken only by the dying embers in the fireplace. Generators in the barn, Jake said automatically. I should. Another flash of lightning revealed Emma standing close enough to touch, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Stay, she whispered. Please. Jake felt the last of his defenses crumble. He reached for her, pulling her into his arms with a desperation that surprised them both. Emma melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt as if she were afraid he might disappear. I'm scared, Jake admitted against her hair. I'm scared of wanting this too much. I'm scared too, Emma replied. But I'm more scared of walking away and always wondering what might have been. Jake pulled back to look at her face in the flickering firelight. If you stay, if we try this, it has to be real. No games, no pretending. I need to know you're here because you want to be, not because you're running from something else. Emma reached up to cup his face in her hands. I'm here because in 3 days, you shown me more kindness and made me feel more at home than anyone has in years. I'm here because when I look at you, I see a man who's strong enough to build a life worth living and gentle enough to make me feel safe in it. Jake closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. I don't know how to do this anymore. It's been so long since I let anyone close. We'll figure it out together. The simple faith in her voice undid him completely. Jake kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of 3 years' worth of longing. Emma kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her hope and determination into showing him that she was here to stay. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jake rested his forehead against hers. Your aunt is expecting you in Wyoming, he said practically. My aunt will understand. She's been telling me for years that I need to stop overthinking and follow my heart. What about your job? I can teach anywhere. And something tells me the school district around here could use a good teacher. Jake laughed, a sound Emma realized she had never heard from him before. It transformed his whole face, making him look years younger. You really want to give up city life to live on a ranch with a grumpy cowboy? I want to build a life with a man who plays beautiful music and rescues stranded travelers and has the patience to heal broken horses, Emma corrected. The ranch is just a bonus. As if summoned by their conversation, Rex appeared from wherever he had been hiding during the storm, tail wagging as he settled himself at their feet. Even the dog approves, Emma laughed. Jake pulled her down onto the couch, wrapping them both in the quilt his grandmother had made. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, they were warm and safe and together. So what happens now? Jake asked. Emma settled against his side, her head on his shoulder. Now you call the garage tomorrow and tell them to take their time with my car. And I call my principal and tell her I won't be coming back in the fall. Just like that? Just like that. Emma tilted her head to look at him. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that feel right in your heart, even when they don't make sense to your head. Jake tightened his arms around her, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. My grandfather always said the land would bring me what I needed when I was ready for it. Smart man. Yeah, he was. Jake pressed a kiss to the top of her head. He would have liked you. Probably while morning came earlier than Emma expected, announced by the crow of a rooster and the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains, creating patterns on the wooden floor of the guest room. She had slept better than she had in months, wrapped in the quiet peace of the ranch and the comfort of knowing she was safe. The smell of bacon and coffee drifted up from the kitchen, making her stomach growl with hunger. She dressed quickly in the same clothes from yesterday, wishing she had thought to bring an overnight bag, and made her way downstairs. Jake stood at the stove, his back to her as he tended to a pan of eggs. He had changed into a clean flannel shirt and jeans, his dark hair still damp from washing. Rex lay beside the kitchen table, tail thumping against the floor when he saw Emma. "Good morning," she said softly, not wanting to startle him. Jake turned, and Emma was struck again by how handsome he was in the morning light. His gray eyes seemed clearer today, less guarded than they had been the night before. "Morning. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Emma admitted, taking a seat at the table. "This place has a way of making you feel peaceful." Jake set a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast in front of her, along with a steaming cup of coffee. "My grandfather always said the land has healing properties." Course, he also believed in all sorts of old wives' tales. Emma took a bite of eggs and closed her eyes in appreciation. "This is delicious." "Thank you." Simple ranch cooking, Jake said, but Emma caught the pleased expression that flickered across his face. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, both looking out the kitchen window at the landscape washed clean by the previous night's storm. The mountains in the distance looked closer somehow, their peaks sharp and clear against the bright blue sky. "The road should be passable in a few hours," Jake said eventually. "I'll take a ride out and check, then we can see about getting your car fixed." Emma nodded, though something in her chest tightened at the thought of leaving. "I should call my aunt and let her know what happened. She'll be worried." "Phone's in the living room," Jake said, standing to clear their plates. While Jake did the dishes, Emma called her Aunt Margaret in Wyoming, explaining about the car trouble and her unexpected detour. Margaret was relieved to hear Emma was safe and insisted she take her time getting there. "Sounds like you found yourself a real gentleman," Margaret said with a chuckle. "Maybe this little adventure is exactly what you needed." After hanging up, Emma wandered around the living room, studying the family photographs on the mantelpiece. There were pictures of Jake as a young boy with an older man she assumed was his grandfather, photos of prize-winning cattle and horses, and one picture that made her pause. It showed Jake, maybe 5 years younger, standing next to a blonde woman in a wedding dress. But something was wrong with the picture. The woman's face had been carefully cut out, leaving only her body and dress visible. Emma felt a pang of sadness for whatever heartbreak had led Jake to mutilate the photo rather than simply remove it. "That's my grandfather's ranch," Jake said behind her, making her jump. She hadn't heard him come into the room. Emma pointed to a different photo, not wanting him to know she had been staring at the wedding picture. "He looks like he was a wonderful man." He was. "Raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 8. Jake's voice was matter-of-fact, but Emma heard the underlying pain. "Taught me everything I know about ranching, horses, life. What would he think of you living out here all alone?" Jake was quiet for so long that Emma thought he wasn't going to answer. Finally, he said, "He'd probably tell me I was being a fool. He always said a man wasn't meant to go through life alone." "But, you don't believe that?" "I tried believing it once. Didn't work out so well." Emma wanted to ask more, but Jake had already turned away, his posture making it clear the conversation was over. Instead, she followed him outside to help with the morning chores. The ranch was beautiful in the daylight, stretching out in all directions with rolling hills covered in grass that moved like water in the gentle breeze. Jake showed her around the property, introducing her to the horses and cattle with the pride of a man who truly loved his work. In the main corral, a magnificent black stallion paced restlessly, tossing his head and snorting whenever Jake approached. "That's Shadow," Jake explained. "Been trying to break him for 3 weeks now. He's got spirit, but he's also got trust issues." Emma leaned against the fence, watching the horse with interest. "What happened to him?" "Previous owner was rough with him. Used whips and harsh bits instead of patience. Now Shadow thinks every human wants to hurt him." There was something in Jake's voice when he talked about the horse that made Emma look at him more closely. She had the feeling they weren't just talking about Shadow anymore. "Maybe he just needs someone to prove that not all humans are the same," she suggested gently. Jake's hand stilled on the fence rail. "Maybe. Or maybe some things are broken too badly to fix." Before Emma could respond, Jake opened the corral gate and walked slowly toward Shadow. The horse immediately backed away, ears pinned and nostrils flaring. Jake stopped and began to talk in a low, soothing voice, the same tone he had used with Emma the night before when she was scared and disoriented. Emma watched, fascinated, as Jake gradually gained the horse's trust. It took nearly an hour, but eventually Shadow allowed Jake to approach and place a gentle hand on his neck. The big horse trembled but didn't pull away. "How did you do that?" Emma asked when Jake finally emerged from the corral. "Patience. And showing him I wasn't going to hurt him, no matter how much he tried to push me away." They worked together for the rest of the morning, Emma helping Jake feed the animals and repair a section of fence damaged by the storm. She was surprised by how much she enjoyed the physical work and the quiet companionship. Jake was different when he was working, more relaxed and open than he had been the night before. Around noon, Jake saddled Thunder and rode out to check the road conditions. He returned an hour later with good news and bad news. "Road's clear," he announced as he dismounted. "But your car's going to need more than just a coolant refill. Looks like the radiator's cracked." Emma's heart sank. "How long will that take to fix?" "Joe's garage in town might have the part, but it being Saturday." Jake shrugged. "Probably won't be ready until Monday at the earliest." "Monday?" Emma felt a mix of dismay and, if she was honest with herself, anticipation. "I can't stay here until Monday." "You've done enough already. Where else are you going to go?" "Town's 20 miles away, and the only motel is closed for renovations." Emma stared at him, realizing he was right. She was stuck, at least for the weekend. "I'll pay for my room and board," she insisted. Jake looked almost offended. "This isn't a hotel, Emma. You're a guest." That afternoon, Jake drove Emma into town in his pickup truck to arrange for her car to be towed and repaired. Cedar Falls was exactly what Emma had expected from a small Montana town, one main street lined with family-owned businesses, a diner where everyone seemed to know each other, and a pace of life that felt almost foreign after years in Chicago. At Joe's garage, the news was as bad as Jake had predicted. The radiator would need to be replaced, and the part wouldn't arrive until Monday afternoon at the earliest. "Sorry, miss," Joe said, wiping his hands on a greasy cloth. "I know it's inconvenient, but that's just how it is out here. Everything takes time." As they walked back to Jake's truck, Emma noticed how several people greeted Jake with friendly waves, though she also noticed how he kept the conversations brief and didn't introduce her to anyone. "They seem to like you," she observed. "It's a small town. People are polite. It's more than politeness. That waitress in the diner practically lit up when she saw you." Jake's jaw tightened. "Maggie's just friendly." Emma had the feeling there was more to the story, but she didn't push. Instead, she found herself studying Jake's profile as he drove, noting the way he held himself apart even in his own community. That evening, they fell into an easy routine. Emma helped Jake prepare dinner while he told her more stories about the ranch and his grandfather. She found herself laughing at his dry humor and gentle teasing, and she noticed that Jake seemed surprised by her laughter, as if he had forgotten how good it felt to make someone happy. After dinner, Jake picked up his guitar again. This time, instead of the melancholy tune from the night before, he played something lighter, more hopeful. "That's beautiful," Emma said when he finished. "Do you know any songs with words?" "A few. Will you sing something for me?" Jake hesitated, then began to play a soft ballad about lost love and second chances. His voice was rough but genuine, filled with emotion he seemed unable to express in conversation. Emma found herself mesmerized, not just by the music but by this glimpse into the heart Jake kept so carefully guarded. When the song ended, they sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Emma curled up in the corner of the couch, her eyes beginning to droop despite her efforts to stay awake. "You should go to bed," Jake said gently. "Tomorrow I'll show you more of the ranch if you'd like." "I'd like that very much," Emma murmured, but she made no move to get up. The warmth of the fire, the comfort of the couch, and the peaceful feeling that surrounded her in this house were making it hard to move. Jake continued to play softly, instrumental pieces that seemed to weave a spell around the room. Emma's eyelids grew heavier and heavier until finally, despite her best efforts, she fell asleep right there on the couch. Jake didn't notice at first, lost in his music and his thoughts about the unexpected gift of Emma's company. When he finally looked over, he found her sleeping peacefully, her dark hair spread across the cushions and her hand tucked under her cheek like a child's. For a long moment, Jake just looked at her, something shifting and breaking open inside his chest. When was the last time someone had felt safe enough in his presence to simply fall asleep? When was the last time someone had trusted him so completely? Carefully, Jake set aside his guitar and moved to the couch. Emma didn't wake as he gently lifted her into his arms, her head settling naturally against his shoulder. She murmured something in her sleep, a soft sound of contentment that made Jake's heart skip a beat. He carried her upstairs, moving slowly to avoid waking her. As he laid her carefully on the bed, Emma's eyes fluttered open for just a moment. "Jake," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep. "Go back to sleep, Emma. You're safe." She smiled sleepily and closed her eyes again. "I know," she murmured. "I feel safe with you." Jake stood frozen beside the bed, Emma's words echoing in his mind. She felt safe with him. When was the last time anyone had said that to him? When was the last time he had let anyone get close enough to feel anything about him at all? As he quietly left the room, Jake realized that Emma Sullivan was becoming dangerous to the careful life he had built for himself. She was making him remember what it felt like to want things he had convinced himself he didn't need. But maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Jake Morrison had built walls around his heart higher than the mountains surrounding his ranch in Montana. At 32, he was known throughout the county as the man who could break any wild horse but couldn't be broken himself. His weathered hands told stories of rope burns and hard work, while his steel-gray eyes revealed nothing of the pain he carried inside. The ranch sprawled across 2,000 acres of rolling hills and grassland, inherited from his grandfather who had taught him that land and livestock were more reliable than people. Jake lived alone in the old farmhouse, with only his border collie Rex for company. Most evenings found him on the front porch, guitar in hand, playing melancholy tunes to the setting sun. 3 years had passed since Rebecca left him standing at the altar. She had taken one look at the simple country life he offered and decided she wanted something bigger, something more exciting than cattle and quiet nights under the stars. The humiliation had cut deep, but the betrayal had cut deeper. Since then, Jake had turned down every invitation to town socials and church gatherings. He had work to do, horses to train, and a heart that needed protecting. The morning started like any other, with Jake checking on the pregnant mares in the far pasture. The sky was gray and heavy with the promise of rain, typical for late October in Montana. As he rode his stallion Thunder across the property, he noticed something unusual near the old oak tree by the creek. A small red car sat tilted at an odd angle, steam rising from under its hood. Jake approached cautiously, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle secured to his saddle. Strangers didn't often wander onto his property, especially not this far from the main road. As he got closer, he could see someone slumped over the steering wheel. His protective instincts kicked in despite his desire to avoid complications. The woman inside was unconscious, her dark hair falling across her face. She wore a simple blue dress that looked expensive but was now wrinkled from travel. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Jake dismounted and gently tapped on the window, but she didn't respond. The car's engine had overheated, and, from the looks of things, she had been there for a while. Without hesitation, Jake opened the passenger door and carefully lifted the woman from the car. She was lighter than he expected, and something about her peaceful expression made his chest tighten in an unfamiliar way. He carried her to a shaded spot under the oak tree and used water from his canteen to dampen his bandana, gently dabbing her forehead. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open. They were the color of emeralds, bright and startling against her pale skin. For a moment, she stared at him in confusion, taking in his cowboy hat, worn denim jacket, and concerned expression. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're on my ranch, about 20 miles outside of Cedar Falls," Jake replied, his voice rougher than he intended. "Your car broke down. How long have you been out here?" She tried to sit up but swayed slightly. Jake steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I don't know. I was driving to visit my aunt, but I think I took a wrong turn. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Jake frowned. No wonder she had passed out. "What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Sullivan." She looked around at the vast landscape, then back at him. "I'm sorry for trespassing on your property. I was just so lost and tired." "Jake Morrison," he said simply. "And you're not trespassing if you need help." Emma smiled weakly, and Jake felt something shift inside his chest. It had been so long since someone had looked at him with anything other than caution or pity. Her smile was genuine, grateful, and it reached her eyes in a way that made him forget, just for a moment, why he kept people at a distance. "I should call someone," Emma said, reaching for her purse in the car. "My phone must be dead, but maybe." "No cell service out here," Jake interrupted. "Nearest phone is back at my house. Can you walk, or should I carry you?" The question made Emma blush, which surprised Jake. Most people were eager to get away from him as quickly as possible. "I can walk, I think." Jake helped her to her feet, keeping a supportive hand on her elbow as they made their way to where Thunder was grazing. The horse looked up at them with mild interest, used to his owner's occasional rescues of injured animals. "He's beautiful," Emma said, running her hand along Thunder's neck. The horse nuzzled her palm, which made Jake raise an eyebrow. Thunder was usually skittish around strangers. "He likes you," Jake observed. "That's unusual." "I've always been good with animals," Emma replied. "My grandmother had horses when I was little. I used to spend summers at her farm in Kentucky." Jake found himself curious about this woman who had literally fallen into his carefully ordered world. As they walked toward the house, Emma told him about her job as a teacher in Chicago, how she had decided to take a few weeks off to visit her aunt in Wyoming after a difficult year. "What made it difficult?" Jake asked before he could stop himself. Emma was quiet for a moment. "My engagement ended 6 months ago. I thought I knew what I wanted, but it turns out I didn't know myself at all. Jake understood that feeling all too well. They reached the house as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Rex bounded up to greet them, tail wagging enthusiastically as he circled Emma. Another admirer, Jake noted dryly. Rex usually hides when strangers come around. The farmhouse was rustic but clean, with handmade furniture and family photos covering the mantelpiece. Emma noticed the guitar leaning against a chair by the window and the books stacked on every available surface. You read a lot, she observed. Long winters, Jake explained, gesturing for her to sit at the kitchen table. Coffee? Something to eat? Both would be wonderful. As Jake moved around the kitchen, Emma watched him with growing interest. His movements were economical and precise, like everything about him was carefully controlled. She noticed the way his shoulders tensed when she asked questions about himself, how he deflected personal inquiries by offering more coffee or asking about her travels. The rain began in earnest, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. Jake looked outside and shook his head. Road's going to be washed out, he said. Happens every time we get a storm like this. Usually takes a day or two to clear. Emma's eyes widened. Are you saying I'm stuck here? Afraid so. I can drive you to town tomorrow if the roads are passable, but tonight you're my guest whether you like it or not. The thought of spending the night in this quiet house with this enigmatic cowboy should have made Emma nervous. Instead, she felt a strange sense of peace she hadn't experienced in months. There was something about Jake's quiet strength that made her feel safe, even as she sensed the walls he had built around himself. I don't want to impose, she said. You're not imposing. Guest rooms upstairs, second door on the right. There are clean towels in the closet. As the evening progressed, Emma found herself drawn into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Jake prepare dinner, listening as he told her about the horses he was training and the challenges of running a ranch alone. He was more talkative than she had expected, though she noticed he skillfully avoided talking about himself. After dinner, they sat in the living room while the storm raged outside. Jake picked up his guitar and began to play, his fingers moving over the strings with surprising gentleness. The music was beautiful and sad, full of longing and unspoken emotions. Did you write that? Emma asked when he finished. Jake nodded, setting the guitar aside. Music helps me think. What do you think about? For a moment, Jake looked like he might answer honestly. Then, the shutters came down over his eyes again. Ranch business mostly. Boring stuff. Emma recognized the deflection but didn't push. Instead, she told him about her students in Chicago, the way their faces lit up when they finally understood a difficult concept. Jake found himself genuinely interested in her stories, asking questions about teaching and city life. As the night wore on, Emma began to yawn despite her efforts to stay alert. The emotional exhaustion of the past few months, combined with her ordeal that day, was catching up with her. You should get some rest, Jake said, standing to bank the fire. Emma rose from the couch but swayed slightly, still weak from not eating properly. Jake was beside her in an instant, his strong hand on her arm to steady her. I'm fine, she protested, but even as she said it, her knees buckled. Jake caught her easily, lifting her into his arms before she could object. No, you're not fine. You're exhausted. He carried her upstairs to the guest room, his steps sure and steady despite the burden. Emma found herself studying his profile in the dim light, noting the strong line of his jaw and the way his dark hair curled slightly at the collar. Jake set her down gently beside the bed, his hands lingering on her shoulders longer than necessary. For a moment, they stood close enough that Emma could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Jake stepped back abruptly, as if suddenly, aware of how close they were standing. Sleep well, Emma. Tomorrow I'll get you back on your way. After he left, Emma sat on the edge of the bed and wondered why the thought of leaving tomorrow left her feeling strangely disappointed. She had known this man for less than 12 hours, but something about Jake Morrison intrigued her in a way that surprised and unsettled her. Outside her window, the storm continued to rage, as if nature itself was conspiring to keep her in this place, with this complicated man who played beautiful, sad music and rescued strangers without expecting anything in return. Emma fell asleep to the sound of rain and distant thunder, unaware that downstairs, Jake sat awake in his chair, staring into the fire and wondering why the thought of her leaving felt like another abandonment he wasn't prepared to face.